Hello, everybody. My name is Angel Cancino. I'm a research analyst, part of the clean energy technology team at S&P Global. Today, I will present about the Latin America solar photovoltaic markets. I will give an outlook on annual installed capacity, and from 2023 to 2030, that is a period that we cover. And I will talk a little bit about the drivers and barriers that can impact this outlook. Now, first, we have this map. This is just to give some overview of the solar PV activity that Latin America has. What we can see here are historical installations. As you can see, Brazil, Mexico, and Chile are the countries that are dominating the region as the largest PV markets in Latin America. These three countries make up for an impressive 85% of the total installed capacity in the region. Latin America has currently around 64 gigawatts of photovoltaic installations. And as you can see, Brazil is the main country for installations right now. Brazil is leading the photovoltaic market in the region as the country has over 10 gigawatts of utility scale installed capacity and over 21 gigawatts of distributed generation. The market in Mexico has decreased a little bit, but it's still the second largest market in the region. Even with some of the regulatory challenges imposed by the current administration, the installed capacity of photovoltaic projects is around 30 gigawatts up to date. Now for Chile. In Chile, the increased procurement for solar has been driven mainly by the economical recovery of the country and some changes that have been taking place in renewable energy generation policy. This has made the country to reach an installed capacity of around 11 gigawatts by the end of last year. Now for the forecast. 115 gigawatts are expected to be installed in the whole region in the forecasted period that, as I mentioned before, is from 2023 to 2030. 60% of these installations are expected to come from the utility scale segment, while 26% are expected to come from small, medium, and large commercial, and 18% coming from the residential sector. This year, 2023, Latin America is expected to install 26 gigawatts of solar in the whole region. We expect that the region will add around 20 gigawatts of utility scale installations and 14 gigawatts of commercial and residential altogether. Now, for this presentation, I will focus on the 5 main markets that S&P follows. And I will talk a little bit about the rest of the countries of Latin America at the end of the presentation. Now, we first start with Argentina, where most of the new installations will come from the utility scale segment. Argentina has struggled to keep its renewable energy momentum, as many of the award projects have presented some delays and some financial challenges. The country risky macroeconomics of the environment, along with some transmission constraints, have also limited the number of new projects being installed and being on changing phases from under construction, getting permits, and so on. In 2022, Argentina installed around 300 megawatts of solar installations, which represent 20% more than what Argentina installed on 2021. This shows a tendency for the growth in the past year. Now, from the forecasted period, that is from 2023 to 2030, Argentina is forecasted to install around 5 gigawatts of solar capacity, with 86% coming from the utility scale segment and 14 from the residential and the commercial segments together. We expect the annual installations for new projects to keep increasing annually. Utility scale projects will account for over 4 gigawatts of the installed capacity expected for the forecasted period. And as I mentioned before, most of the new installations will come from this segment. This is to new tenders taking place and new corporate PPAs, while the commercial and the residential sector will account for only 700 megawatts combined. Now, in addition to the growing demand for electricity, government actions to reduce carbon emissions are expected to increase Argentina's installed capacity in photovoltaics. For example, one of these examples is the Renov Art program, which are basically tenders. The country plans to add around 10 gigawatts of renewable energy to the grid by 2025. And to achieve this goal, a total of 58 solar projects, accounting with a capacity of almost 3,000 megawatts, were submitted in the first tender from this program back in 2019. Not all of the projects that were awarded in this tender have been completed. As I mentioned before, there have been some delays, but they are on track to be completed. Now, for Brazil. As I mentioned before, Brazil is the largest market in Latin America regarding the development of solar photovoltaic. Solar energy has now become the second largest source of the Brazilian electricity matrix, just after the hydro. Last year, Brazil installed around 14 gigawatts of new capacity, most of them coming from distributed generation, 73% to be precise, coming from the distributed generation. The increase in distributed generation installation is due to the new regulation that was published on January of 2022. This new law aims to revoke some of the grid privileges held by the user before. And with this, what it changes now is that now users will start be charged with grid-related cost. We expect the annual installations for distributed generation projects to peak in 2023, as most of the developers and end users that apply before the end of the grace period that this law allowed will need to complete the installations before the end of this year. Solar distributed generation will continue to capture market share from local distributors despite a less favorable market. At first, we thought that this new law was going to impact negatively for the rest of the year, I mean, after 2023, but we expect that the reduction of installation is not as drastic as some might believe. And now, on the other side, on the utility scale sector, Brazil has launched a total of 12 government-backed energy auctions that have included solar energy. On December of last year, the Brazilian Ministry of Mines and Energy announced that the next auctions are already scheduled for the period 2023 on 2025, and those will include solar. Another driver for the market in the utility scale sector is that recently PPAs have increased considerably in Brazil. One of the main reasons is that consumers have gained the awareness of the possibilities of acquiring energy through PPAs. Furthermore, a new reform presented to the country last year aims to accelerate the trend towards bilateral power PPA. This by promoting a full liberalized power market. Now, going with the forecast, utility scale projects will account for 28 gigawatts of the installed capacity that we expect for 2023 to 2030, owing to new tenders taking place. As I mentioned before, there is a new tender already scheduled, and also to new corporate PPAs. Solar photovoltaic additions dedicated to green hydrogen production could also drive the renewable capacity addition as the global demand on this sector increases. We assume that all of this together, the net metering policy, the new market regulations, the elevated regulated tariffs, and further declines in costs from photovoltaic products will support the momentum for the installations during the forecasted period. Now, going with Chile. Chile installed around 3.7 gigawatt of solar installations last year, and 93% of this was coming from utility scale installations and 7% from the commercial and the residential sector. For the forecasted period, Chile is expected to install almost 12 gigawatts of solar capacity. 84% of this capacity is expected to come from the utility scale segment and 15% from the residential and the commercial segment. Now, utility scale projects will account for almost 10 gigawatts of the installed capacity that is expected for the whole forecast. And the current main driver for some of the projects that follow on the small utility segment, but also follow on the commercial segment are the pequeños medios de generación distribuida, or small means of distributed generation, also known as PMGD. These are projects that are under 9 megawatts of capacity. These kind of projects have a special benefits because they are regulated differently. These projects have the ability to sell the energy at stabilized prices, and these projects are not exposed to the same risk as some projects that are sold with that are regulated through power purchase agreements, PPAs, or they don't have merchant risk. Now, solar addition, as well as Brazil, solar addition dedicated to green hydrogen production will drive renewable capacity additions, as some of the new regulations to promote the use of these technologies are being discussed by the government currently. Chile is aiming to be one of the main producers of green hydrogen, so we expect that the capacity installed dedicated for green hydrogen to increase in the forecasted period. We expect the annual installation of PV projects to decrease after 2023. This is due to an oversupply of energy and some transmission constraints that the country can have. Now, we go with Colombia. Now, with last year, Colombia installed around 500 megawatts of new solar installations. Most of them, 94% of these, are coming from the utility scale segment, and only a small amount coming from the commercial and residential segment. For the forecasted period, we expect Colombia to install around 4.5 gigawatts of capacity. 91% of this new capacity is expected to come from the utility scale segment, and the rest from the residential and the commercial segment. In total, we expect that the utility scale projects will account for over 4 gigawatts of of new installations, as the country is expected to increase the use of PPAs and as new tenders take place in the country. Now we go with Mexico. Mexico installed around 1.4 gigawatts of solar installations last year in 2022. 53% of these new installations are coming from the utility scale segment, and 46% are coming from the commercial and the residential combined. The historical annual capacity that we have has decreased on utility scale installations in the past years due to the cancellation of the fourth energy auction that Mexico had planned, and also due some bottlenecks being imposed in the renewable energy sector in the country. As one of these bottlenecks is the attempt to modify the power industry law to favor the Federal Electricity Commission, CFE. They are expected, it was intended to give them some preference to the fleet of the CFE over other private sources of electricity as photovoltaic and one private projects. This in the utility scale segment. Now for the distributed photovoltaic installations, these have continued to rise as this segment has been largely unaffected by the country's policy changes. Now for 2023 to 2030, Mexico is forecasted to install around 14 gigawatts of solar PV capacity. 60% of this capacity will come from the utility scale projects and 43% from the residential and the commercial together. We expect the annual installations for PV projects to keep increasing until the end of the forecasted period. S&P Global expect that for the following 3 years, the installed capacity will be low. It would be a low volume of installation as the market continues to be unfavorable for private investments in the country. And also if transmission expansion projects continue to be put on hold. Now, for the rest of the countries in Latin America, as you can see here, these countries show a slow increment in the installation capacity that they have annually. However, countries like the Dominican Republic, as we can see here, Peru, and Puerto Rico are showing a faster growth in installations lately. For instance, for the Dominican Republic, we expect that the country installed 2.6 gigawatts of new capacity in the forecasted period. 66% of this capacity we expect to come from the utility scale segment, and the rest from residential and commercial. Most of the utility scale segment, most of the utility scale projects that are taking place in the Dominican Republic are coming from PPAs. Now, in second place in this chart, we have Peru. Peru is expected to install 2.2 gigawatts of new additions. 80% of these new additions will come from the utility scale segment. This due to the installation of some of the projects awarded in tenders. Later, I will show you a little chart where it explains a little bit more on tenders and PPAs and what resources the countries are using to increase their capacity. But now we continue with Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is expected to install 1.8 gigawatts of new capacity, 69% coming from the utility scale segment through the use of mainly PPAs. Now, for the rest of the countries that we have in this chart, most of the new capacity coming from these are coming from the commercial sector that are projects under 5 megawatts, that small projects. Therefore, the amount expected for the forecasted period is not as big as the rest of the countries. Now, in the following chart, the chart that we have over here, we can see the different support mechanisms that each country has in place. As we can see, private PPAs and energy tenders are the main drivers for the utility scale projects in most of the countries that we discuss, countries like Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Colombia, while self-consumption through net metering and net billing are supporting the installations of distributed generation. Solar additions dedicated to green hydrogen production, and also new regulations on auxiliary services and battery storage will drive renewable capacity, new additions, I mean, as the global demand increases. And we can see here that the off-grid government support is also important in some countries like Argentina, Panama, and Peru. And with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to SolarB for the invitation. If you have further questions that or I didn't mention something that you were interested in, don't hesitate to contact me through my email. You can see my email over here. Thank you again, and have a nice day.